You are listening to From Embers, a weekly show on CFRC 101.9 FM about anarchist and anti-authoritarian ideas and practice. We are broadcasting from the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee peoples on land that has come to be called Kingston, Ontario, Canada because of the thievery and brutality of the Canadian state and its empire-loving parents. From Embers is about fires, some real and some metaphorical. Fires started generations ago and tended to over the years. Little sparks all across this territory that we hope will grow, spread, and engulf the thieving state called Canada and the capitalist system that has plagued this land since the fur trade. As the pandemic wears on, more and more of the events that usually help us mark the passing of the year are being cancelled. It's been 6 months since many of us got to be at an indoor social event with one another, and those of us who are used to traveling and sharing space with people from other regions, particularly in the summer, are in many cases sticking close to our local area much more than we ever have before. For people on the West Coast, the Victoria Anarchist Bookfair would normally be one of those events, bringing anarchists together from around the Victoria, BC area and beyond to discuss ideas and share space every September. Their in-person event is, like most of ours, cancelled this year, but they've moved things online and are hosting a week of events in a different form. The From Embers crew is happy to announce that we'll be hosting a number of their interviews and presentations right here on our feed next week. In anticipation of that, and to get us all excited for our virtual trip to Victoria, I'm sharing this interview that I conducted a couple of weeks ago with 3 members of their collective. Next week, you'll see a lot of their content, especially presentations and interviews, hosted on our feed, and we hope that many of our listeners will take this opportunity to participate in a book fair that maybe many of us would not have otherwise had the chance to attend. In the meantime, here's that interview with Kim, Alan, and Nate of the Victoria Anarchist Bookfair Collective.
On behalf of the Victoria Anarchist Bookfair Collective, we'd like to acknowledge that this interview is taking place on the Swanwind territory. There are a few different nations that make up the Swanwind people, and I, Nathan Mott, am coming specifically from West Dennis territory, and Tim and Alan are coming to you from the Swanwind territory in colonial Victoria, in unceded colonial Victoria, BC. And we'd like to acknowledge that we continue to do our work in solidarity with the people of this territory, and we recognize the inherent right in the sovereignty, and we thank them for allowing us to embrace our work as allies and as anarchists, and we work every single day to combat colonization and the genocide that is taking place on this land and all across Turtle Island. So we'd like to consider this interview as part of that work and as part of that journey. And without further ado, we'd like to start the interview, and always think of where we are and whose land we are on and how we move forward. My name is Nathan Moss. I'm a part of the Victoria Anarchist Bookfair collective. I've been on the collective for 5 years. I'm of Romanian and English descent, and I've been a visitor on the territory for 28 years, and sadly it took 20 of those years to really understand the situation with colonization and genocide, but I'm here to keep doing that work now that I've started, and I'm happy to be here with Tim and Howard.
Hi, my name is Kimberly Croswell. Thank you, Nate, for beginning this for us. I am a settler of Scandinavian and British descent, and I've been on these territories since 2003. I've been an anarchist as long as I can remember, but I think I really had my coalescence as an anarchist in my mid-20s when I actually began working for anarchism as an activist, as opposed to just reading about it. Though I do acknowledge that the reading is where it begins, which is why I'm dedicated to being a part of the Anarchist Bookfair collective.
I'm Alan Etliff. I was actually born in Victoria. I grew up in Kingston, Ontario. I've been involved in the anarchist movement since the 1980s, and I'm one of the co-founders of the Victoria Anarchist Bookfair.
Thank you for your introductions. Can you, one of you or all of you, briefly explain what is the Victoria Anarchist Bookfair?
The Victoria Anarchist Bookfair is an annual anarchist event that happens on unceded Lekwungen territory in what we call Victoria. It encompasses both often a festival component as well as the actual book fair on the weekend. So it takes place on the third weekend of every September, and it encompasses normally in pre-COVID times, it would encompass many tablers who would come in and share with us their talents and their wares, from books to zines to herbal botanicals to acupuncture. T-shirts, what have you.
Music.
It's a real variety of people who show up.
And we get tablers from across North America and also visitors from around the world. We've had people from Japan, from Argentina, Germany, many different places. And last year we had someone who shipped us a Kurdish artist who shipped us his work for tabling from Germany, for example. So AK Press tables with us, PM Press tables with us, Little Black Cart tables with us, as well as people who smaller presses like Contagion Press. It's a wide-ranging book fair.
Yes, but we would be amiss if we didn't talk about the workshops as well. And the workshops are really something that a lot of gravitate towards when they come to the book fair, and they range from workshops that can teach people how to do practical things like self-defense or zine making or typing or whatever, to also theoretical stuff. We had a really interesting one about Indigenous futures, presents, and pasts last year, which was really amazing, by Makwala Smith, who is Kwago Mumtigila, and his co-presenter Sammy, and they spoke about future and past and presence of Indigenous sovereignty, values, and kinship. So that's one example. We also like to use the book fair as a means to mobilize for activities that are important in our region. So, for example, when the Anarchist Book Fair was taking place 6 weeks before the torch relay in Victoria, we mobilized that book fair to get people on the ground to protest the torch.
I'm not sure which of you is best to field this question, but if someone could speak a little bit about how the book fair started and when it started, and maybe a bit about how it has changed since then, that would be great too.
Sure, I could do that. I came to Victoria in 2003 from Edmonton, Alberta. And in Edmonton, Alberta, I'd been involved in founding a reading circle, and also co-founded a book fair, which was held in 2003. Then I moved to Victoria and took up a teaching position at the University of Victoria. When I came to Victoria, I was welcomed by a large community of anarchists. And eventually conversations got around to what was going on in Victoria as far as really embedding an anarchist presence here. And my ambition was to keep this book fair idea going, because I'd seen how it really gave people a place to educate themselves and radicalize their point of view in Edmonton, a very productive space of learning and transformation. And so I was eager to start something like that in Victoria. In 2006, some people who are involved in the Victoria Anarchist Reading Circle, which had been going on since, I think, 2005, they proposed to do a zine fair. And they asked me to speak about anarchism at the zine fair. And so I did. It was a small event, but we treated it as like a first experiment with holding something like a book fair. And the next year, we took it to the next level and really launched the book fair as it's organized today. We had the benefit of anarchists who joined us who were from Quebec, who've been involved in the Montreal Anarchist Book Fair, and their input and guidance was invaluable. They really gave us a template for organizing in terms of how to invite tablers, how to organize events and workshops, how to create a zine that you can distribute, strategies for promotion, and so forth. So the torch was handed on to Victoria from Montreal very effectively. So we held the book fair in a downtown location, and it attracted a lot of people. It was a great success. We were able to go around the tables and ask people to donate, and in that way build up a fund for the next year's book fair. And that's what we've been doing ever since. The tablers donate 10% of what they've been able to make in the course of the book fair. People were also excited by the variety of workshops that we held. Something that I felt very strongly about as someone who studies the history of radical art was having a good poster. And so I contacted an Indigenous artist, Gord Hill, Kwakwakiwak, to create the first Victoria Anarchist Book Fair poster. It was the second version of the Victoria Anarchist Book Fair, but really the one that launched us.
I'd like to add in on, over time, something that the book fair really strove for, and this was particularly like the first few years we were just getting our feet wet and starting to really coalesce about what we were doing and how we would move forward. But really early on, we really strove to have Indigenous solidarity politics in our work. And so basically we did things like anticolonial walking tours in 2008 so that we could educate people what the original names and places were in Victoria and the Songhees people. We wrote a very important solidarity statement, which we always post in the doorway as well as online.
Could you read that, Kim, please?
Sure, I can read it. The Book Fair Collective supports the struggles of Indigenous peoples throughout North America to assert their cultural autonomy and territorial sovereignty. Victoria is located on the traditional interlapping territories of the Lekwungen and Songhees peoples, who have endured the seizure of much of their land by force and repeated attempts to obliterate their culture through multiple forces of colonization. The resilience and strength of these and other communities who make ancestral connections to this region in the face of injustice challenges us to support them and all Indigenous peoples in the ongoing struggle against colonialism, capitalism, and cultural genocide. This is something that we work towards, and it's taken many years because we didn't have a lot of relationships in the beginning. We were developing these relationships. And as we develop them, we gain trust and we make mistakes. I have made mistakes and I've had to learn from my mistakes. And I think it builds strength within our communities to be able to move forward together and take what we learn and just work and move forward. And on that note, I'd like to ask Nate to also speak to how he believes the book fair has changed over time, because Nate has come in for the last 5 years.
Yeah, so I came in 5 years ago. My journey to anarchism kind of started when I was in my mid-20s, although I did say earlier that I really started becoming aware at 20. But about 6 years ago, I went to Tremolton College with Senator Troy here in Victoria, and I took Indigenous Studies. And I completed the program 6 years later, and through that, I became aware of Indigenous culture and the history and the means and ends of the Canadian genocide and what was happening continuously and presently on the territory in particular. And so around that time, I became more and more involved with anarchism. I started going to the book fair simply as a curious individual. I didn't understand what all the workshops were about, but I hung around there. I met people, and I bought them books. And then a year or so later, like in 2014, I'd say, I met Tim, and then I met Alan, and so after that, I became part of the Anarchist Bookfair Collective, and I used my combination of experiences with the Indigenous community, both radical and academic, and anarchism to help augment our solidarity piece so that we could really hone in on it at the book fair. And so Alan and Tim really got the ball rolling, and I've been blessed to be able to have a lot of good relationships with not only anarchists but Indigenous people. Some visitors here, and others are from here, and other Indigenous people across Turtle Island. So I've been able to add that piece about the importance of, well, this is colonialism, and that there have been a lot of things that have been lost due to colonialism and genocide. There are still opportunities for Indigenous people to regain sovereignty and to regain control of their land, resources, culture, and ceremonies. And so for me, that was kind of the piece that was really brought to me through my journey throughout Indigenous studies, and realizing that there was more to it than even Tremolton College was teaching me as a settler. And so I was able to kind of connect the dots and realize that, sovereignty and helping Indigenous people and communities regain the freedom and the rightful place on their own land, and decolonizing is really the place where I started to branch out. And I've been blessed and I've been fortunate that the entire collective starting in 2015, for me, I've been really open and really allowed me to kind of explore and establish relationships and then transform those relationships into opportunity for the book itself. And it's hard work, but it's work that it's why I became an anarchist. And it's something that we're really passionate about collectively, and certainly something that I will continue to work on, and we will as well. But that's really been my focus as a collective member, is making sure that those relationships are fostered and that we follow protocol at all times, and we focus on the issues at hand, not only in terms of representation, but also using the book fair as opportunity for the Lacroix people to have language workshops at our fair, to have opportunity to come and talk to us about some of the resistance movements that are going on within the territory and nearby. So we've all tried to focus on those basic tenets of land, language, and ceremony and ways of life, so that we can augment the chances of indigenous people retaining their rightful nation and place on their own land, as I said earlier. That's been my whole mission. Now my missions have added to over time, as Alan and Tim have been introducing me, along with the other members of the collective, introducing me to more and more radical anarchist thought and acting methodologies and ways of resistance. But that's what I really brought to the table at first. And it's something that I'm happy to do, and it's really something that I want to do. I want to make my life work. I want to continue to grow and never stop helping the book fair, as Alan said, become a place where people can transform and gain new ideas, and most of all, just have a space where we can be anarchists and be free and be happy and get together and talk about revolution.
Thank you so much for that. You actually anticipated my next question, which maybe Kim and Alan can also speak to, which is why a book fair? Why is the Victoria Anarchist Bookfair important? Why do you think it's worthwhile?
In Edmonton, when I started the book fair with the collective who are doing the Edmonton Anarchist Reading Circle, part of the idea was to give people a place to go where they could buy anarchist publications, literature, encounter new presses, new ideas, and so forth, participate in workshops in the absence of any social center like that or any avowedly anarchist presence in the city. There were no radical bookstores in Edmonton. That was a real absence. In Victoria, the launch of the Victoria Anarchist Bookfair really coincided and dovetailed with another project I was involved in, which was the founding of Camus Books, our anarchist bookstore in Victoria. And so part of this synergy, very productive synergy that developed between the Anarchist Bookfair and Camus Books was one of mutual aid, mutual promotion, and using Camus Books as an extension of the book fair during our Festival of Anarchy to stage events and so forth. I've mentioned that over the years we've encountered people coming into the book fair from other countries. I should also say that many people come to the book fair and encounter anarchism for the first time at the book fair who are from the local community. So one of the reasons that I find the book fair so satisfying is just to see this large variety of people coming through the doors, getting excited about what they're discovering and going away with a different perspective about anarchism and also about the state and also about well, things like Indigenous sovereignty and other issues that have been addressed. The book fair really functions as a space of opening and exploration that otherwise wouldn't be there in Victoria. And I think I've been to a number of anarchist book fairs in different places, and I've seen the same interdynamic. The book fair also reinforces and helps people who are doing the hard work of publishing. Our comrades who are putting out the publications that we learn from. In a very practical way, holding a book fair is good for what it supports. Other radical publishers, zinesters, people who are engaged in creative work and have a political outlook that's informing their creativity. And with the book fair, they have a place to interact with others, make new connections, and get their work out there.
Well, for me, I'd like to tie in both of what Alan and Nate are kind of referring to express how that the book fair for me is about community building. And that's what it was from the get-go with the inclusion of community groups like Food Not Bombs, who have been serving at every book fair every year for 15 years. And it's an opportunity for people to gather and meet new people and meet each other at the workshops or out in the courtyards. Anywhere people can gather and see, look at what other people are picking up and maybe interested in reading, and just talk about maybe what that book is about, or why are they here, or maybe they're going to an anti-pipeline workshop and they want to find like-minded people they can organize with to oppose a pipeline.
Yeah, we've actually, the book fair has actually served as an important
mobilization tool. Like we bring people together to mobilize together and to talk about, not just to talk about what is needed to be done, but actually organize and to take the next steps from talking into action. And so that's what we did in 2009 with the Anarchist Torch Relay. Disruption, that's one of my favorite years, actually. It's another year where Gord Hill designed the poster. And the poster is an image of what looks like a group of clandestine activists, with one person holding a firebrand, like a torch with fire, and another person pointing on the map. Let me describe let me read what Gord himself wrote about this poster. It's got the torch for obvious reasons, but it also illuminates and helps people find their way through darkness. The British Columbia flag is turned upside down. According to the Okanagan and Secwepemc, it's actually referring to a treaty made between their nations and the colonial government. As long as the three rivers flow and the sun shines, the tribes in the colony will live side by side in peace and friendship, neither interfering with the other. Bracket, similar to the two-row wampum agreement between the Dutch and Six Nations Confederacy, close bracket. I placed rings coming out of Victoria again to relate it to the Olympic torch relay, etc. And so at that book fair, we played a very special game. It was called Spot the Cop, and so we did. And but more than that, it was just really a really important means for people to come together and to be invigorated in empowerment, so that they were empowered in their resistance. So we had people like Splitting the Sky attend that year, and he spoke about his life as a warrior. And for anyone who doesn't know who Splitting the Sky is, he was a veteran of the Attica prison uprising in 1971 and elder at Gustafson Lake standoff in 1995. And that year he had attempted to arrest George W. Bush.
Yeah, indicative of the importance of the book fair that year, we were involved in mobilizing against the 2010 Olympics under Gord Hill's slogan, "No Olympics on Stolen Native Land." That was a tremendous effort, and of course it impacted across Canada as the build up to the Olympics happened. And the torch relay was to begin in Victoria. We successfully disrupted it. And that is partly why we had police visiting. I should mention that the police also disrupted our venue. They intervened and put the fear of anarchism in the minds of the people who are the directors of the not-for-profit organization where we had our book fair. So we had to move it. We did move it. We refused to back down, so to speak, and kept it going.
Yeah, and now it's continuing, and we're not even going to let COVID stop us.
Yeah, in our own way.
You are listening to From Embers on CFRC 101.9 FM, your weekly anarchist radio show based out of so-called Kingston, Ontario. Or you might be listening to the podcast edition of From Embers from anywhere in the world on your smartphone. In anticipation of our collaboration next week with the Victoria Anarchist Bookfair, we're currently hearing my recent interview with 3 members of the Victoria Anarchist Bookfair Collective. They're talking about their upcoming event and how they've transformed it to an online series in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. If you want to check out the Victoria Anarchist Bookfair, you can find out more at victoriaanarchistbookfair.ca. Here's the rest of that interview. So I had to do some research about British Columbia's COVID policies in advance of this, but I see that gatherings are actually technically legal up to 50 people in BC right now. There would have been some legal potential for in-person workshops. What made you all decide to do an online event this year, and how did you come to that choice?
Well, we have a larger capacity than 50, generally speaking. We have maybe that's the amount of tablers who normally show up. So our book fair is a venue that requires a larger group of people to come in and really engage. And so our workshops would have more than 50. And we didn't feel that was feasible in this pandemic. And so we decided to physically postpone the actual book fair until the following year, after the time after COVID, and just reinvigorate the idea of valuing books and authors and anarchism and local activism in the term, and by using podcasting as the new medium for this era.
We viewed the podcast option, aided by From Embers, as an opportunity to actually expand the scope of our presenters, take it more global, which
That's
is
true.
that's happened. So we made a virtue out of a necessity in a way. I should also mention that we are going to be promoting Camus Books as the place where people in Victoria can go and get their radical literature throughout the book fair week. So we're hoping that under these circumstances, people can benefit by going to Camus Books, where we have been practicing a strict protocol vis-a-vis how many people can come in at one time. We have plexiglass up to separate the people behind the till from the customers, and so forth.
And masks are encouraged.
Yeah.
What is putting the book fair online going to change? What do you think will be accomplished by an online event? And what's going to be sort of lost and gained in switching to that medium?
Well, you can't replace face-to-face. And the spontaneity that goes with that, the pleasure of seeing people who come every year to the book fair and meet each other again and again and again. You can't replace the physicality of picking up a book, flipping through it, getting excited by what you're reading. You can't replace the intimacy of attending a workshop and having the free flow of back and forth of questions and so forth. Those things have to do with what it means to be a human being. Even sitting out on the grass and on the lawn outside the book fair and sharing food. I recognize there are many things that are going to be lost as a result of this situation. I already mentioned the positive side, or at least one aspect of it. That is the capacity to have people from England, Hawaii, and elsewhere, New York, who might possibly not be able to attend, share their ideas and thoughts.
The positive side of this is that we can we're hoping that with the support of From Embers that we will have greater outreach in a different capacity and intrigue people about what goes on in this area of the world in the best of times. And by being able to bring together different voices from around the world, we are hoping that we can introduce people to new aspects of anarchisms that they would not have maybe encountered on a local level. That being said, we're also still really attentive to the local. And I'd like to point out that we are hoping to have topics that we can talk about through this week of podcasts that you are so grateful. We're so grateful that you're helping us with, that we will have local topics as well. But yeah, it turns us not so much as into a multitude of people who meet together at one place where there's random encounters, but we are turned into more pods, pun intended, in order to find our groups of people that we are kind of listening in groups. Groups are listening in groups.
Is that something that you're encouraging for people to sort of quote unquote attend the book fair in groups and discuss it in person as well while listening to it?
Yeah, I mean, why not? It's a really great model. I mean, you can listen in your small pods. Mm-hmm. And you can discuss what you hear. You can. There's going to be an online blogging component that will be ongoing, and it's going to be listing a whole bunch of current events that are happening on the ground here. And so people can engage with that. And that's on our website, victoriaanarchistbookfair.ca.
Anarchism is about a lot of things. It's about resistance. It's about solidarity, it's about community, it's about respect for the land and other people and other ways of living. But above all, I found over my journey throughout anarchism and indigenous solidarity, it's about relationship. And that's what the book fair is allows people to do, is form relationships. And I'd like to talk about one friend of mine who has been a big part of the book fair over the years, and that his name is Audie Thomas, and he's from the Walmart Nation, and every year he and his Walmart dancers and dinners have opened up the book fair as we acknowledge the land with the beautiful music and song that he had passed down from his family. And he's done a lot of work, and he's an example of a relationship that we formed through solidarity and love and respect. And he's a great individual, and his family has been great, and the relationship has been reciprocal, and we appreciate everything that Audie has done, and he's a great friend to all of it. And so that's what it's all about, is relationships and taking those relationships and continuing on to make the world a better place. So yeah, I just wanted to point that out, and that he's a great friend of ours, and one of the consequences of a virtual book fair is that we don't get to have that opening ceremony, that reminder of the dawn and tradition and solstice of the Wandering territory. But he's an example of why we do this work, so that those dawns and those dances and their families can once again thrive and flourish and keep going on for generations to come.
Augie has meant a lot to all of us, yes, and I acknowledge that from the bottom of my heart as well.
Thanks, Nate.
I had the chance to interview some members of the Montreal Anarchist Bookfair Collective last year. So obviously they were doing like an in-person book fair pre-COVID. But they sort of emphasized how the book fair itself is fun and relevant and useful perhaps for attendees. But in fact, for the collective, it's like a lot of work and sometimes not always the most fun. Can you speak a bit about your organizing process and what it's like to put together the Victoria Anarchist Book Fair for you?
Well, we have a really tight collective, and everyone pre-COVID times used to meet in Nate's living room.
We've rotated through different folks over the years, and that's a reflection of the strength of the anarchist community in Victoria. So there have been a number of years when I have not been involved. There have been a number of years when Kim has not been involved, and yet the book fair continued. As I mentioned, the Montreal folks, when we first launched the book fair, we had the advantage of past experience from Montreal. We were able to develop a very robust template, I would say, and we've stuck to that and handed it on. So the knowledge has not been lost, and as a result, the book fair has maintained a real consistency through the passage of different people being involved. Every time different people join the collective, they bring their own interests, insights, contacts into the book fair. So one of the things I've experienced and seen over the years is change, which is a process of enrichment. And for me, learning from others. And I've loved that.
For me, it's more about, I'm very much interested in seeing the result. And so I'm very task oriented. And I also come at it with an idea that we have certain benchmarks or times that we have to reach certain goals at certain times of the year. And at the very beginning, when we're just starting for that year, that's the first thing the whole collective talks about, is what the timing is going to be like. How are we going to work things out, and what needs to be done first, second, third? And at that point, we divide up the work based upon who wants to gain experience and who wants to do something, who can bring in their experience. So there's a lot of sharing. There's also a lot of people who are inspired to do creative work. So for example, the zine is often something that people just want to do as a creative exercise on some years, but then in other years, the zine is just, we have the template, let's just plug in the template and just do it and get it done. So it just depends on the energy of the people that are there. There is a lot of give and take between everybody, and we are an invite-only collective. So people who are invited to join, and then we collectively decide before we make the invite if that would be good for the collective, and then it happens. And we brought in someone new this year who is a very technologically savvy person who is able to help with the podcasts. And so this year, instead of focusing on timing and having goals to achieve by set amounts of time, we've been focusing on technology and what sort of technology do we need to be able to work with. And then the time has come to reach these goals and come to some sort of fruition. So we're not really rushed. And I think if any sort of collective starts to feel stressed about what they're doing, the stress happens as if they didn't time themselves properly and they're over rushed at the very end. And I feel like we have set ourselves up with really good timing, and we are basically on time, and it makes it a lot easier for us.
We innovate. Last year, we were told by our regular venue that they were converting one of the rooms that we usually use for workshops into an office space. And so we had a meeting and talked about it, and we bought a huge tent. We set up the tent attached to the gym where the book fair is held, and we had workshops in the tent. And then later on, we found ourselves loaning that tent out to actions that were happening at the BC legislature.
Yes, those are the Wet'suwet'en solidarity actions. So we set up the tent so people were occupying the legislature can have a place to sleep.
Yeah, things happen. Good things.
What are some of the online events or workshops happening this year that you are each most looking forward to?
I have an interview coming up with Tatine Point of Ancestral Pride. They've been, or she had been, along with her family, involved in frontline radical anarchist indigenous movement for most of her life. And she has been up and down what is now known as Vancouver Island, living and breathing indigenous sovereignty and protecting of the land and protecting of revival of the language and revival of indigenous autonomy and freedom to live with their dominant system and their ways of living. And she has been a huge influence for myself personally, and she taught me a lot during my decolonization anarchist journey. And so I'm going to be interviewing her about her journey and to where she came from in terms of being a young girl and growing up indigenous and having those challenges and how she evolved from there into really into a matriarch warrior woman who is a shining example for women in her community and also anarchists who are engaged in solidarity work, because she really holds settlers and anarchists to account. And she, I know for me, she's really she's not afraid to get on my behind if I make a little mistake, you know. And then those are good things to learn, because we need to sharpen we need to always be, to account as settlers, and we need to keep learning and growing. And that team does a great job of that. And he takes it easier on me now because he knows me for so long. But yeah, she keeps me on my tippy toes, and I've learned a lot, and I'm looking forward to interviewing her this week.
I'm looking forward to some hip-hop performances that are being organized by Lee Reed in Hamilton. He's still getting in contact with people, but I understand he's going to be putting together a series of performances that we're going to be streaming, I guess. I'm not sure how it's going to work. I've also been deliberately not checking out any of the other interviews by people in the Book Fair Collective, because so many interesting people are being interviewed, and I want to share the surprises and learning moments for the 14th to the 20th when things are being aired. And I can tune in every day and learn something new about the people I've been working with and their insights and dialogues with people like Ruth Kinna in the UK and others.
I agree. I'm interested in learning about the kinds of questions my compatriots in the Book Fair Collective come up with. Mm-hmm. They're all really amazing people with very intelligent minds, and they all come at things from different perspectives. And so I'm interested to hear what their perspectives are and how they foster the conversation with their interviewees. So I'm really intrigued to hear what's going to happen on that score. But I'm also happy to promote that I'm excited to also have had the opportunity to interview Kathy Ferguson as my person who I've focused on. Kathy has been a very inspirational anarchist in my own work as an aspiring academic. And her book on Emma Goldman, Politics in the Streets, is the first book I cite in my dissertation, because Kathy is a genius, and she never talks about that, but because she's very humble, but I think the world of her, and I learned so much from her. And we spoke about more than just the cult of personality around Emma Goldman, but the fact of the matter is that there is a movement, and there are 1,000 women who were in a movement that Emma Goldman was just one person being a part of. So it's going to be interesting. I'm looking forward to getting the response from my compatriots about what they think about that.
One of the advantages that you mentioned to having an online event is that people can sort of participate in the book fair from all over the place without having to travel. If people are listening to this and they are like, oh, cool, I can go to the Victoria Anarchist Bookfair, how do they do that? How do they find you online or otherwise?
They can reach us on our website, victoriaanarchistbookfair.ca, all one long word. And that's where our blog is, and everything will be posted there. I'm also under the impression that From Embers is posting things as well, so there's 2 locations. Am I correct?
Yes, absolutely.
I should also mention that we also have a Facebook page and a Twitter account.
The Twitter handle is Victoria Anarchist Bookfair.
Great, yeah, and we can link to all of those different ways to find you in our show notes for this episode as well.
I guess one thing I should mention is I'd encourage anyone who's interested in starting a book fair in their community to just email the Victoria Anarchist Bookfair crew. We'd be happy to share our experience. Something that I hope has come through is the way in which the Victoria Anarchist Bookfair has built connections that are enduring connections in Victoria and reinforced activist and resistance politics in the region over time. We proved ourselves to be tenacious despite the various forces. And I mean, as speaking as someone who's had the police knocking on their door, the various forces that have tried to take us down or disrupt what we're doing. In terms of dimension that we haven't talked about, which means a lot to me, as part of the book fair and the Festival of Anarchy, from time to time we put on art exhibitions, as well as performances, musical performances. That's part of our outreach. For example, in 2012, we put on a 150 Years of Resistance art show showcasing Indigenous artists. In 2010, we staged an exhibition at the University of Victoria Art Gallery downtown, showcasing the work of the World War III Illustrated Collective, an anarchist collective that was founded in 1980 in the United States. We had a panel discussion involving Gord Hill, myself, and others in the World War III collective to talk about the interface of art and radical politics. And so the Anarchist Book Fair is also a cultural event. And I just want to stress that that's also part of the process of outreach and developing a culture of resistance generally.
Great. Well, thank you so much for all of your time today. I'm really looking forward to hosting all of the interviews that members of your collective are coming up with. I think it's going to be a really great event. So thank you again for including us.
The Government of Canada sincerely apologizes and asks the forgiveness of the Aboriginal peoples of this country for failing them so profoundly.
This is stolen land where you've been standing. Understand it. Switch it from stitch and bandage to substantive rearrangement of some things. Reparation made for corporate gain. First Nation pains a moral stain. We hide genocide on reservations. Too many pages of our history's erased to mitigate the national shame of it. Built by slave like labor hobbling arrogant racist John A. McDonald. $10 notes is check the quotes. Genocide personified, exposed. Colonial go both coasts. And they got railway posts for the Chinese ghosts. Mine for diamond, nickel and gold. Total control of petrol flow. Ayo, no Canada, we want none of that. Bogus, broken corporate management. Jingle, patriot, fascist. Petro-national carbon capital, man. Do you understand where you stand? Global capital of resource extraction, fracking, mining, and conflict diamond. The gold, silver's the other mineral fine. Cause we hide the villainous minds behind it. We hide the ties of culpability binding to ecocide they leave behind them. Our law facilitates the rape of the lands, the lakes, and the forests that we take from shore, offshore, Earth's core. Suck the source while cops enforce it. The true north is a fortress for the corporate. Out of war forfeited for the profits. It's subsidized, colonizer force. Police report the mixed stock price soar. This is war like it was before. Mama Earth versus the company store. Ayo, no Canada, we want none of that. Bogus, broken corporate management. Jingle, patriot, fascist. Petro-national carbon capital, man. Do you understand where you stand?
Anarchist and anti-authoritarian music podcast
that's going to come out every month.
Ransom what?
So what's your ultimate goal, I guess, in this?
Yeah. We out for the
rising up against the oppressor.
The attitude that you see in hip-hop.
Let me give you a sample of some of the lyrics that had some of the older ladies among the stockholders white with dismay.
Go to ransomnoteshigh.libsyn.com
or get them from the Channel Zero Network.